If you have ever wondered why some people seem to build wealth faster than anyone around them, why they appear to glide through life with increasing assets while paying far less in taxes than the average worker, then stay with me. Because today I want to show you a strategy that has quietly shaped the fortunes of many of the richest individuals in America, a strategy that almost no one explains in simple terms, a strategy that has nothing to do with luck and everything to do with understanding how the financial system rewards certain choices. And the strategy I want to break down for you is known as buy, borrow, die, a method that, when used correctly, can transform how your income works, how your cash flow operates, and how you grow your net worth year after year without triggering the avalanche of taxes most people assume are unavoidable. And I want to guide you through every piece of it, because once you grasp how this works, you will never look at income or assets the same way again. So let us begin by simplifying the core idea, because many people hear the phrase buy, borrow, die, and they immediately think it is something complicated, something reserved for billionaires, something wrapped in legal jargon and hidden rules. But the truth is that the foundation of this method is incredibly simple. You buy assets that rise in value. You borrow against those assets instead of selling them. And eventually, after you are gone, those assets receive a step up in basis that eliminates the taxes that would have been due on all that growth. What makes this strategy even more powerful is that borrowing money is not taxable income, which means the cash you take out of your assets does not count as taxable earnings, even though you can use that money to live, to invest, to build, to grow, essentially turning your assets into a machine that pays you without ever triggering the taxes that ordinary income earns. Now imagine for a moment that you buy something that increases in value over time, something like a property, a set of stocks, an index fund, or even a piece of art. Let us begin with real estate, because it is one of the most intuitive examples. Suppose you buy a building for $1 million. You manage it carefully. Rental income covers the expenses, and the property appreciates steadily over the years. Maybe it grows 4 or 5% each year, maybe more during times of inflation. After 10 years, the property is worth $2 million. You have gained $1 million in value, but here is the crucial point. You never paid taxes on that appreciation because you never sold the building. The government does not tax growth that sits inside an asset. That growth is called an unrealized gain, and unrealized gains are not taxable. The same thing happens with stocks. If you buy $1,000 of Microsoft stock or an index fund like SPY and it becomes $10,000 over time, you owe no tax until you sell it. And in the buy, borrow, die strategy, the key is that you almost never sell. But before we go deeper, we need to clarify what you should actually buy, because not every asset works well for this method. The asset must appreciate, but it must also be something you can borrow against. That means the asset must be lendable, something a bank or financial institution is comfortable issuing a loan on. Real estate qualifies. Stocks held in a brokerage account qualify, and when you borrow against them, it is called a securities-backed line of credit. Cash value life insurance qualifies. Certain retirement plans like a 401k allow borrowing, though not all retirement accounts do. Even art can qualify because collectors and institutions lend against high-value collections. The common theme is simple. You want assets that can rise in value and that banks recognize as collateral. Once you understand what to buy, then you unlock the second step, which is borrowing. And this is the moment most people fail to understand because they are so conditioned to believe that borrowing money is harmful or dangerous, that taking loans is always a weakness. But wealthy individuals use loans differently. They use loans as income. And here is why it works. When you borrow money, loan proceeds are not taxable. The government does not treat borrowed cash as income, because technically you are required to pay it back. And since it is not income, it completely avoids the taxes that ordinary earnings from a job would face. Think about how powerful that is. If you wanted to take $100,000 out of your stock portfolio, your financial advisor might tell you to sell the stock. But selling triggers taxes. Depending on your state, depending on long-term capital gains, depending on net investment taxes, you could lose 30% of that money just to taxes before you ever see it. The wealthy avoid this entirely. Instead of selling, they simply borrow $100,000 against the portfolio. They keep the stock, they avoid taxes, and they use the borrowed money for whatever they want. And the same principle applies to real estate. If you buy a house for $500,000 and over time it becomes worth $1 million, you can take a home equity line of credit and borrow $200,000 tax-free. If it is investment property, you can borrow even more through a cash-out refinance, also tax-free. This is one of the ways wealthy real estate investors fund their lifestyle and expand their portfolios. They let the properties cook in what some call the financial crock pot, appreciating year after year, and then they borrow against the equity instead of selling. They do not take taxable distributions. They simply redirect the growth into usable cash, and the entire time, they still own the asset and still enjoy the appreciation. Now, some people hear this and say, but wait, if you borrow money, you must pay it back, right? And the answer is yes for some assets and no for others. When you borrow against life insurance, for example, you do not personally repay the loan. When you pass away, the death benefit pays the loan off. Even better, the death benefit is not taxable. So the loan was tax-free and the repayment is also tax-free. For real estate, sometimes you repay through refinance, sometimes through sale, sometimes through other assets. For stocks, you might pay the loan down or roll it forward. But the core idea never changes. The money you borrowed was tax-free, and the asset kept appreciating while you had access to that cash. But all of this leads to a final step, the part that truly completes the cycle in a way that no other wealth strategy can match. And that step is death. Eventually you will pass away, and when you do, something extraordinary happens to your appreciated assets. They are reset to their current market value for tax purposes. This is called the step up in basis. And this single rule in the tax code is what makes the buy, borrow, die strategy so devastatingly effective. Because imagine again that you bought a property for $500,000 and imagine that over decades it rose to $2 million. You borrowed $1 million against it during your lifetime, using that money to live or to invest further. Then when you pass away, that property is still worth $2 million. Now your heirs receive it. And what is the tax bill? Zero. Because the basis is no longer $500,000, it is now $2 million. If they sell it for $2 million and pay off the loan, they walk away with $1 million tax-free. The entire lifetime of appreciation, all the borrowing, all the advantages, are wiped clean at death. And this same rule applies to stocks, to real estate, to art, to many types of assets. It is one of the most powerful features of United States tax law. And here is something that may surprise you even more. You can even trade assets without paying taxes during your lifetime if you know how to use tools like the 1031 exchange. Imagine buying 4 houses for $500,000 total, letting them increase in value, then selling them while doing a 1031 exchange into larger properties. You avoid taxes again, then those properties grow further. You borrow against them, you use the money, you grow your lifestyle or your portfolio, and then one day, maybe decades later, you pass away. And the properties receive a step up in basis once more. Your family owes nothing, even though the properties may have grown by millions of dollars. And throughout your life, you had access to the equity. You never sold, you never triggered taxes. You used loans as income. You lived off the growth, you leveraged the system, and you repeated the cycle over and over. This is the essence of buy, borrow, die. And it is the backbone of how many wealthy individuals structure their lives. They do not think about income the way most people do. They think in terms of asset appreciation and access to borrowing. They think about compounding without interruption. They think about keeping every dollar inside the system for as long as possible. And once you understand the principles, you can start to view your own financial decisions differently because you stop asking yourself how much income you can earn and start asking how many assets you can accumulate that will appreciate and then be used as tax-free borrowing vehicles. If you want to understand how the wealthiest people turn the buy, borrow, die strategy into a steady stream of income they use for daily life, for business expansion, for generational planning, and for building lifestyles that appear to grow without limits, then you need to look closely at the cash flow mechanics that operate behind the scenes, because most people have been taught that income can only come from work, from wages, from business revenue, or from selling assets. Yet the wealthiest individuals know that the safest and most tax-efficient form of income is not earned income at all, but borrowed income. Income created by holding assets that appreciate and borrowing against them again and again while avoiding the tax consequences that traditional earnings trigger every single year. And once you understand why this works and how it operates, you will change the way you think about earning money for the rest of your life. So let us continue by reshaping your definition of income. Because if you only see income as something that passes through a paycheck, something taxed before it even reaches your hands, something controlled by employers, schedules, and tax brackets, then you will always be stuck in a cycle where your ability to get ahead is limited by what the government allows you to keep. You will work harder and earn more, but each step up pushes you into a higher bracket, and the reward becomes smaller each time. Wealthy people refuse to play this game, not because they have secret exemptions, but because they understand a fundamental truth. The government does not tax money that you borrow. Borrowing is not considered income. And if borrowing is not income, yet you can use it as income, then suddenly you have opened a door to a financial system that behaves completely differently from the one you grew up believing was universal. Now imagine that you build a portfolio of assets that rise in value, not because you sell them, not because you trade them, but simply because time does its work. It could be real estate, it could be a diversified stock portfolio, it could be cash, value life insurance, it could be a combination of all of these. Each year the value grows, but you do not withdraw the growth, you do not sell the gains. Instead, you leave everything untouched, and you allow the compounding to build upon itself. And as the value rises, lenders see this growth and recognize it as collateral. They offer you lines of credit, they offer you fixed loans secured by your stocks, they offer home equity, credit secured by your properties. Suddenly you have access to money without touching the asset. And this is where the strategy becomes a tool for income, because instead of earning taxable dollars from a job or business, you take borrowed dollars from your appreciating assets. Borrowed dollars are tax-free. Borrowed dollars are not counted as income. Borrowed dollars do not push you into higher tax brackets, yet they behave exactly like income in your life. You use them to pay bills, to fund purchases, to invest in new opportunities, to handle living expenses, to create comfort, or to fuel growth. So while other people spend their lives earning $100,000 and losing 30% or more of it to taxes, the wealthy borrow $100,000 and lose none of it to taxes. They may pay interest, but strategically the interest is often far lower than the taxes they would have owed if the same amount had been earned as income. Let us go deeper with a simple example. Imagine you have $1 million in stocks. Over years it appreciates to $1.5 million. You have $500,000 of unrealized gains, but instead of selling the stock to create income, you approach your brokerage and request a securities-backed line of credit. They offer you the ability to borrow, for example, $400,000. You accept $100,000 now. You owe no tax, you owe no penalties, and you continue to hold the full stock position so that it keeps appreciating year after year. Your borrowed $100,000 becomes the income you use in your daily life, but it is income that the government does not categorize as income. And suppose interest rates are 5%. That means your cost to access $100,000 is $5,000 per year in interest. But if you had sold the stock instead of borrowing, your tax bill could have been $20,000, $30,000, even more depending on your state. Wealthy individuals always choose the path that keeps the most money in their hands, and borrowing against assets is almost always the winner. But there is another hidden benefit to this form of income, a psychological one that changes your entire relationship with money. When you earn income from a job, your mindset becomes focused on spending what you earn and saving what you can. When you borrow income from appreciating assets, your mindset shifts to maximizing the size of your asset base. Because the larger your asset base, the larger your borrowing capacity becomes. And the larger your borrowing capacity, the more income you can safely access without ever needing to sell anything. And when you can access income without selling, your assets continue to grow uninterrupted. That uninterrupted compounding is the true engine of long-term wealth. Now let us look at how real estate magnifies this effect even more. Suppose you buy an investment property for $500,000. You manage it well, collect rental income, maintain it, and over a decade it grows to $1.2 million. You now have $700,000 of equity. You could sell it, pay taxes, and walk away with far less, or you could refinance and take $300,000 in borrowed money out of it. Again, that borrowed money is tax-free. And because it is, real estate, the interest may be tax deductible, depending on how the money is used. That borrowed money becomes income for you, spendable, usable, lifestyle-changing income. And meanwhile, the property keeps appreciating. And as it appreciates, you gain even more borrowing capacity, which means even more potential income in the future. You never sold, you never triggered taxes, you simply transformed your equity into income. But here is the genius behind this method. The wealthy do not just borrow income once, they borrow repeatedly, they borrow strategically, they borrow at moments when assets are high in value, they borrow when interest rates are low, they borrow to invest in other appreciating assets, they borrow to multiply the effect. A wealthy family might borrow from stocks to buy real estate, and then borrow from real estate to buy more stocks. They build ladders of collateral, they build overlapping streams of borrowing power. And all the while, none of this is taxed because none of it is income in the traditional sense. Now, some people worry that borrowing will cause their debt to accumulate endlessly. But what they fail to understand is that the final step of the strategy erases the problem entirely. Because when you eventually pass away, everything resets. The step up in basis eliminates the capital gains that would have been owed if the assets had been sold during your lifetime. Your heirs inherit the assets. They inherit them at their market value, not at the value when you purchase them. And while they may choose to pay off some of the loans that you used as income, they are paying those loans using the tax-free value of the assets you left behind. And in many cases, life insurance is used to wipe out debt instantly upon death, leaving the assets fully intact. The entire lifetime of borrowed income becomes tax-free permanently. Now imagine how different your financial life becomes if you intentionally build toward a future where your income comes from borrowing instead of earning. Imagine how much easier it is to save when you know you will not rely on wages forever. Imagine how much more quickly your assets can grow when you never need to sell them. Imagine how much more efficiently you can plan for retirement when the majority of your usable cash flow is legally excluded from taxation. The buy, borrow, die method allows you to design a life where you are not trapped by tax brackets, not limited by paycheck timing, not reduced by withholding, not forced to liquidate assets to survive. Instead, your income is generated by the quiet growth of your net worth behind the scenes. Your income becomes a reflection of your assets, not your labor. And the more assets you own, the more income you can borrow. And the more income you can borrow, the more your usable cash flow grows, without attracting the attention of the tax system. And one of the most powerful realizations is that you do not need to be ultra-rich to begin. You simply need assets that can appreciate and that lenders will recognize. Even a modest stock portfolio can unlock meaningful income if you allow it to grow and avoid selling. Even a single property can become a borrowing machine over time. Even a well-structured life insurance policy can become a reserve of tax-free borrowing capacity. The true power lies not in the size of your starting point, but in understanding the mechanics and committing to the discipline of not selling, not interrupting compounding, and not allowing taxes to erode your progress. In the end, the buy, borrow, die strategy redefines what income can be. It shows you that income does not have to come from labor. It shows you that income can come from appreciation. It shows you that the government taxes only what you realize, not what you grow. And when you understand that distinction deeply, you unlock a path toward financial independence that operates in harmony with the tax code instead of fighting against it year after year. And once you begin to use this method, you will notice something extraordinary. Your income becomes something you control rather than something controlled for you. So don't break the flow and click on the video that will appear on your screen in the next few seconds. Subscribe and see you soon. Just a reminder, I'm not a financial advisor. This video is for educational purposes only, and any results depend on your own decisions and actions.